Okay, so I'm gonna open up a drawing and then kind of show you how layers work, and then we're gonna work through this together. Okay, so I've got a drawing out here I want to show you. Should open up. There we go. All right. So one of the things, can everybody see okay?
Yep.
Okay. So one of the things that pretty much differentiates or sets CAD apart from, say, manual drafting is this concept of layers and layering. And by having this ability, what this allows you to do is basically fracture your drawing out into, say, multiple drawings based on how they work. So a layer, you can think of it, the best way of thinking of a layer is to think of a piece of paper that you're working on. And each piece of the drawing can reside on its own piece of paper, but these pieces of paper, much like a book, are bound together, so they can't get out of order or they can't get geometrically displaced. You can also have like multiple layers in a drawing. Essentially, it's unlimited. It's like 32,000 something layers if you really wanted to go that far. And I can tell you, if you had a drawing with that many layers, it would be a nightmare to deal with. But it's not uncommon in mapping processes to have many layers. And as you guys transition into GIS in 2 weeks, you're also going to see this concept of layers, and it will work exactly the same way. So it's just a way of containing information that is similar type of information together. So as we look at this little drawing here, you'll notice I have objects that are white, objects that are red, objects that are green, and these are all existing on their own layers. And right in this area, I'm at the Home tab. Right in the middle is this area called Layers. And what you're looking at, these are layers that exist within this drawing: zero, diagram, dimension, section, and text. So I've created these layers and I've given them certain properties. And one of the properties I can give them is color. So you notice that anything that's on the dimension layer is green, anything that's on the text layer is red. And then I can do things like freeze them. So for instance, if I take this and freeze that, you'll notice that all of the red information goes. I can get rid of the green information, and I can even get rid of that. So essentially what you have is a separate drawing based on just freezing and thawing certain levels of information. And a good analogy to think about is if you thought about a multi-story building where you could have, like, say, 20 floors, and each floor could contain 6 or 7 or 20 layers, depending on what was on that layer. So you might have a layer for walls, one for windows, one for doors, one for HVAC, plumbing, electrical, all of that kind of stuff. And if somebody wanted to look at floor 10, you could get rid of all the information below it and all the information above it, and you could just send them that set of information. So that's the very cool thing about layering. Okay, so everybody kind of getting the idea?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to create layers and how to manipulate them. And one of the first things we want to do is talk about layer properties, because they have quite a few different properties associated with them. So what I want you guys to do, we'll just do this together. Just go into a brand new drawing file. Okay. And make sure that you're on the Home tab. And we're going to concentrate right in this area tonight, looking at layers. Then there's also this area here called properties. And a lot of the same information you're going to see in layers also exists over here, because layers can give objects color, but objects can have their own color too. So you can have multiple things going on here. So we're going to kind of talk about layers first and then object properties second. That's where we find that over here. Okay. So we're going to go to the layer command. And if you were typing it in, you could just type in the word layer, L-A-Y-E-R, or that's alias, which is L-A. Having the Home tab open right here, this is your layers command right here. And it's called the Layer Properties Manager, but we're going to go ahead and open that up. And you should see this dialog box that will float out, and it's movable. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and open that up, let's get that. Okay. Everybody finding that all right?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to notice that you can't really read some of this stuff. So if you take your cursor where you get that double-headed arrow, you can slide that over and you'll start to see, you can see what each of those columns is saying. So let's slide that out a little bit. And if you want to make this box bigger, you can also expand that out. Just make sure that you can read everything up here, okay? There's one there I did not get, right there. I'm going to make mine just a tad bit bigger. Like that. Okay, is everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the first thing you need to understand, you've been working on a layer the entire time. So you always have to have a layer in AutoCAD to work on. So just think of it like your current sheet of paper. And there's no way to get rid of all sheets of paper. So there is this layer in here, and it has a name. It's called the zero layer. So you've been working on the zero layer the entire time. And layers have properties. So let's take a look at the properties. And the first thing here is what we call the name of the layer. So the name is just something that you as a user give to it. When you create a layer, as we'll see tonight, it will automatically just call it layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4. And you can rename that to anything you want. And I would certainly suggest that, because when you start working in drawings that are complex, just calling them layer 1, 2, 3, 4 really doesn't mean anything. But if you say tree or HVAC or sidewalk, then it has a lot more meaning, okay? So the layer can have a very complex name. You can have up to 256 characters for the name. I don't recommend that, but you do have that availability, okay? So also we have with a layer, besides a name, we'll have properties that are associated with it. So these are other properties: on, off, freeze, thaw, lock, unlock, plot, no plot, color, line type, line weight, transparency. And we're not going to talk about this new VP layer freeze or description, but those are the major ones. So the first one we're going to take a look at property-wise is what's called a color. And so a color allows you to give that layer color. Any object that goes on that layer then will inherit that color. And so if you have a layer that is set to red and you put an object on it, then it becomes red as well, okay? So while we're in there, notice there is this color box. If you just click on that, it will open up this sub-dialog box called an image tile. Is everybody getting that to execute?
Yes.
As we look through this, there's different ways of setting color, and AutoCAD has like 16.7 million colors available to it. But what you're looking at was called the index colors, and these are numbered values, and they go from 0, I think, to or 1 up to 255, something like that. So these colors right down here are called your 7 standard colors. So you have color 1, which is red, 2, which is yellow, 3, which is green, 4, which is cyan, 5, which is blue, 6 is magenta, and 7 is white. So these guys are called the standard colors because on any computer, they're always going to look the same. When you get beyond that, all of these other ones have just a number, and those numbers can be different depending on what your graphics card is in your computer. So for instance, notice I'm sitting at color 107. Your color might look slightly different. So it just depends kind of what you're looking at there, okay? So these guys are going to have names and numbers for the first 7, and these are just completely numbers. To be honest with you, I usually use the index colors down here, okay? Notice if you go to the True Color tab up here, you've got ways of blending things with red, green, blues, and then you have these things called color books. So you can truly get a lot of different colors availability if you really want to deal with it. But again, I pretty much always just use this. It's just the simplest, okay? Any questions? Okay, so you can cancel that box. We're gonna set these things up here in a minute, so we're just gonna look at them first. So the next thing we get to is a thing called a line type. So a line type is a feature where you take a line and basically break it up into a pattern of lines and spaces, lines and spaces. And so, for instance, that will give you a look to a line. So, for instance, if I go back to this guy, let me see if I can get out of here. This one here. There's an example of a line type right there, and that's what's called a dash line type. So it looks like the line is actually broken up, even though it's really not. So this hole really doesn't exist through it. It's kind of like a mask that we placed on it. So line types in AutoCAD, let me open this back up. Line types in AutoCAD are going to have to be loaded. So the one thing about colors, which I failed to mention, when you click on this box, these guys are right there and ready for you. They're what they call on demand. When you do a line type, if you go to the line type heading and click on the word continuous, you should notice that you have no loaded line types in your drawing right now, except for one called the continuous line type. Is everybody seeing that?
Yep.
So here's how you load line types. You go to the load button. Questions, somebody? Okay. You go to the load button and it'll show you a line type library that you can load from. So these line types are loaded into an area called the acad.lin file. And notice if you scroll down through here, there's quite a few line types available to you. So what I usually do, because they take up a minimal amount of room, is I will just take and load them all into my drawing file. So if you just take your cursor down in here and right click, it'll say select all, and then you hit OK, and then OK again. And when you go to this box now, you'll notice that all of those line types are now in your drawing and they're available to you to use. Did everybody get that to work?
Yes.
Anybody not get that to work for them? Because you're going to need to be able to do that on drawings, okay? So when you, again, when you get into a AutoCAD DWT file, it's going to have just one line type loaded, okay? Okay, so the next thing we have is a property called line weight, okay? And a line weight is kind of like a thick or a wide polyline. So if you open this guy up, you'll notice you have line weights from what's called the default, and these are rated in millimeters up to really thick ones, okay? So it makes all of your objects look like they're polylines with width. And you might have remember me saying that in the future, we're not going to be needing polylines as much because we can give all objects line weight now, pretty much. So there are a few objects that will not accept line weights, but most of them will. And one I'll show you tonight that we're going to look at won't put a line type or a line weight on it, okay? So you don't have to load those either. Those are there also automatically, okay? This guy called transparency does what its name implies. It allows you to basically see through objects underneath it. So if you have it to 0, there's no transparency at all. It's completely opaque. But if you set it up to 90, it's highly transparent. So anything underneath it, you can see behind it. And we're going to play with that a little bit. So by default, it's always set to 0. Highest setting is 90, okay? All right, let's take a look at these two guys. These are called visibility states, on and freeze, okay? So if a layer is on, it is visible on the screen, okay? If it's off, the objects on that layer are invisible, okay? So it's just an invisible, visible thing. The one thing about them though, if they are turned off, you can actually still select them. So that means objects that are turned off are not completely protected. And it also means that if they're turned off, that the printer won't see them. So if you turn them on, the printer will see them. If you turn them off, the printer will not see them, but they're not protected, okay? So freeze and thaw, this guy, freeze thaw, if a layer is thawed, then it also is visible, okay? But if you freeze a layer, it is invisible but completely protected, because when you freeze a layer, it's like taking it completely out of the database, like those objects do not exist. So that's a way of completely protecting the objects. So if you have a choice between using on-off or freeze-thaw, I usually use freeze-thaw because besides giving it the visibility, it also affords protection, okay? There is a bit of a difference too. When you turn objects on and off, your drawing does not regenerate. When you freeze or thaw objects, it does regenerate. So back in the original days of CAD, that was kind of a big deal if you were regenerating things. But nowadays, with the quick processors, we don't have to worry about that. Okay. So the last thing we're going to look at here, well, actually two more, is this guy called lock. So you can lock layers or unlock layers. So if you lock a layer, that gives it complete protection. Nothing can be selected on that layer, but it does remain visible. So you can actually still see that layer, but you can't select objects on that layer. So it's kind of neat because I can use it so that I can use it as a reference, but I can't delete the object. But interestingly, I can use O-snaps for it. So if I have a line that is locked, I can still O-snap it. Okay? So the last property we're going to look at here with layers is this guy called plot. And this is a plot, no plot setting. So if you have layers that you want visible on the screen, but you do not want them to show up when you print your picture or plot your picture, you can set those layers to no plot. So it's just a way of keeping stuff that you don't want a client to see that you can give them without having to freeze it so that you won't see it either. So you may have you may have objects that you want to be able to see, but you don't want somebody else to see them. So you can set things no plot. You do have to be careful with this because any layer that gets set to a no plot will do exactly what it says. It will not plot. And sometimes people set all their layers no plot. I'll go into the plot dialog box and do a preview and nothing's showing up. And that's usually the issue. Okay. All right. So are we good on that? On off, freeze thaw, lock, unlock, plot, no plot, color, line type, line weight, transparency. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and while we're in this box, we're going to create some layers. So right now, you have a layer in your drawing. This is called the 0 layer. It's also called the current layer because that's what that green check means. So because you only have one layer, you have to have it current. And this 0 layer is always going to be there, and you can never corrupt it. So you can't rename it. You cannot delete it. But you can change all these other properties, okay? Can't rename it. Can't delete it. You can rename any other layer and you can delete any other layer as long as that layer is not referencing objects. So if you have a layer that you want to get rid of and it has objects on it, it will not let you do that. Okay. All right, so we're going to create a layer. So you just very simply go up to this little icon right here and you just click it and you should see a new layer pop out. And notice it's got the same properties of the layer that it came from. Okay. So you could change the name at this point or just leave it alone. We're just going to go ahead and leave it alone. We're going to do this again and again and again and again. Okay. And when we're done, you can go ahead and close this dialog box. So we've just created 5 new layers in our drawing. They all have exactly the same properties. But we're going to fix those in a minute. But just wanted to show you that we have them on there. Okay. So there's this little convenient dialog box right here. This is called your layer control dialog box. This allows you to do settings very rapidly that you don't have to get into this box to do. So if you open this guy up, you should now see that you have those layers in there that you've created. And we can set the properties of on-off, freeze-thaw, lock-unlock, and we can actually change colors in here, okay? We cannot rename. We can't load layers. We can't change transparency. So if you have to do any of those things, you're going to have to do them over here in the Properties Manager. This is very convenient, though, for setting layers current. So I'm going to show you how that works here. Okay. Did everybody get 5 layers to show up? Okay, so yeah,
What did
question.
you what did you click in the layers box to make those show up?
These right here.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you in the layer manager, Craig, I
Yeah.
did this, right?
Right. I got that. Yeah.
You have that? Okay, close your manager.
Yep.
Okay. Do you see this little drop down box right here?
Oh yeah. Okay.
Just hit that little drop down arrow.
Yeah. Okay. I got it now.
Is that working now?
Yep.
Okay.
I just didn't see what you clicked.
So no, that's fine. That's a shorthand way of doing some settings, but you can't do everything in there. Okay.
Gotcha.
So it's really nice for like setting layers current and that kind of stuff. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay, perfect. So let's go back to the manager. And I wanted to show you, if you wanted to delete a layer now, you could. So if you clicked on, let's say, layer 5, and up here you'll see this delete layer, just select that and it should make it disappear for you, okay? So remember, once you have objects on that layer, you cannot do that, which is a good thing because otherwise you could purge your whole drawing away.
I have a question.
Yes.
My layer 5, when I try to delete it, it says layer is already in use. What do I need to do to make it not in use?
Okay, Tracy, does it have a green check in front of it?
No, the 0 still does.
Does, okay. You may have had some kind of object on it. Okay, so I'm not really sure. See if you can click on one of the other layers and delete it.
The other layer says the name layer 5 is already in use.
Okay, just click on another layer like layer 4 and then see if that'll let you delete it.
No, because it just keeps bringing up layer name already exists. Maybe if I change the name on layer 5, it'll.
No, well, all I'm saying is like click on one of the other layers and then see if you can delete it.
Okay, yep, it got it. Thank you.
Okay, what that means probably is that you have an object on layer 5 and whether you know it or not. So you might have drawn a little line object or something else on there. Okay?
Okay.
So it's not a big deal, but the cool thing is that it will not let you purge layers that have objects associated with it. So like that's a good thing, you know, if you think about it. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and change some things here, and then we'll start drawing and see how these guys work, okay? So I want you to go to layer 1 and click on the color box. We'll go ahead and open up the color selector, and just click on number 1 and hit OK. And you should notice that is now set red as the color for that one. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Now let's go over and make sure everybody's loaded line types. Click on the continuous line type for layer 1 and you should see all your line types showing up. Is that true for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so what we're going to do is find a layer we'll look for center. There should be a center layer, and notice there's a center and center 2 and an X2. They're all like slightly different sizes. So we're just going to click on the word center and hit OK. And what we've done is we've set the properties for layer 1 to red and center. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay, come down to layer 2, click on his color box, and we're going to make him green. And let's use a different line type so we can see what's going on with this. We'll use one called gas line. So this is kind of neat because it'll insert the word gas every so often. Okay. We're going to go to layer 3. We'll set that to cyan. And let's use a different color here. We use one called zigzag. It's at the bottom. Kind of an interesting looking line type. One more. We're going to go to the last layer. Tracy, yours may say 5 instead of 4. So just use your last layer. And I'm going to make this blue. And I'm going to use a line type called Phantom. Okay, Phantom. Okay, so everybody have some changes?
Yep.
So make sure that layer 0 is current right now. And we're going to click out of here. And it should also show you that 0 is current here. So this will show you the current layer as well. Okay? So we're going to go out and just draw some, eyeball some objects in. So we're going to just draw the line. I'm just going to do a couple of lines. Don't worry about where they are. We're just assuming we're drawing something. Maybe an arc. And what you should notice is it's white and it's continuous, okay? Which is what we've been dealing with for a while now. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to change the layer from 0 to layer 1. So all you have to do is open this box and click on the word layer 1, and it should show you now layer 1. And it should also show you over here that the color is what they call bilayer, and the line type is what they call bilayer. So what that means is as you draw, the object is going to inherit that information from the layer. So let's go and draw a polyline, and you should notice now as you draw on the screen, you're getting a red polyline that has a centerline line type. Circle will take on that same. So anything that you're going to draw here is pretty much going to take that on. If I do a rectangle, it'll take on that information as well. Is that working?
Yes.
Not sure what that is, but anybody problems? Okay, so we're going to go to layer 2, and again, just put a couple objects down. Don't worry about what they are, but what you'll notice is this one is the gas line layer, and if you zoom up and you'll see that it does have the word gas in it. So that's a really cool layer. And again, if I put lines, arcs, whatever, they're taking on all those properties of what's going on there. Put myself a nice ellipse. Okay, just get 3, 4 objects down, whatever you choose. All right. So we're going to go a couple more. Now we're going to do layer 3. I believe this was the zigzag one. So this is interesting as you draw this. So you're going to see that as you draw this, notice you get that really neat zigzag look to your line. So remember, that actually is a line right there. It just has that mask or that look to it. That shape really doesn't exist. So there's no hard edge that you could snap to there or there. It just has 2 endpoints and a midpoint. Draw a circle. Notice how the circle looks, or an arc. So they all take that on. It's pretty interesting line type. Okay. Still everybody doing all right?
Yes.
Okay, so the last one, we'll go to the last layer now, layer 4. Make layer 4 current. This one should come up in blue. And you'll notice this one dash, basically this one has 2, so this has got a phantom line type in it as opposed to as a single, okay? And go ahead and just again put a couple more objects down so you have them out there. And then we'll start to kind of see. So this represents our drawing. And could be, you know, depending on what we're drawing, it could be a map, it could be all kinds of things. And like I said, keep in mind, you're going to see this when you guys get to the GIS component. You'll start to see that right away in 2 weeks. So this works exactly the same way. Very important property. So does everybody have layer 4 current?
Yes.
Okay. So all you need to do now, we're going to freeze a layer. So let's go in. And I'm going to turn, I'll just turn them off. So I'm going to go to this light bulb, and notice when you click on it, it blacks out. Also notice down here on the screen, those objects are gone. If I turn off layer 1, those objects are gone. And if I turn off layer 3, those objects are gone. So they're not really gone. They're just invisible And so basically you have a completely different drawing compared to what you had before. The one thing about Remember, as I said, turning things on and off, you don't protect them. So I could actually still select objects, and I'm going to show you that process here in a sec. Okay, is that working for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's another thing. Go try to turn off the layer that's current. And you should get this message that the current layer will be turned off. What do you want to do? So it's basically saying, yeah, you can turn the current layer off, but if you turn the current layer off, it's kind of like driving down the street with blinders on. You'll be able to actually work, but you can't see what you're doing. So it's not really a good thing to do, but it will let you do that. So if you don't want to do that, we'll just cancel out of there, okay? All right, everybody seen how this works?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's turn these guys back on. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing with freeze and thaw. So I'm going to come through here. I'm going to hit, instead of the light bulb, I'm going to hit this little sun. When you click it, it turns to a snowflake. It says it's frozen. Frozen. Notice they're disappearing as I freeze them. Try to freeze the current layer, and you're going to get this message that you cannot ever freeze the current layer. So that's one big difference. Okay. The current layer can be turned off, but it can never be frozen, okay? From a visibility standpoint, they look the same, but that's not really totally true. Okay, so everybody good with that?
Yep.
Okay, so let's do something here. Go ahead and thaw everything. And I want you to turn everything off except for the current layer. Okay, so everybody got that?
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to type in the word erase, or just type in E and hit enter. And I want you to type in the word all, which should do what? What does this modifier do for us?
Erase everything.
It'll select everything, right? So I'm going to hit enter. It should show you how many objects it found. Now mine found 21, even though I only have like 3 objects visible on the screen. How is that possible?
Since the layers are turned off, you can still affect them.
Correct, correct. Okay, so don't delete them. Go ahead and hit the escape key, okay? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn everything back on. And this time we're going to freeze them. Okay. Now try doing an erase all until see how many it found this time. It should only be the objects that were visible on screen.
Mm-hmm.
So mine only found 3 objects, the arc, the polyline, and the circle. So everything else that was turned to a frozen state was protected. So there is a big difference between on, off, and freeze thaw. And if you have a choice, I would just use freeze thaw most of the time, okay? So let's go ahead and turn guys back on, okay? Any questions so far? We're all good? Okay, so let's take a look at locking. So if you open this up, notice you have the little lock symbol. So everything is currently unlocked, all right? So I want you to take and lock the 0 layer and lock layer 2. And you might notice as you do that, they kind of get dim. So this got real dim and this got real dim. And notice when you take your cursor up to that object, a little lock pops out. So what that's telling me is that object, those objects are not selectable. So if I try to select them like that with a crossing, it says it got 2 objects. If I hit the erase, it says, well, 2 were locked, so it won't let me do anything with them. So I can't move, I can't rotate, I can't do any of that stuff, okay? They're completely protected. And it's kind of neat because it tells you that they're dim. So when you pop that out, it also gives you that lock look. So if I go over here, that one's not locked, where this one definitely is. Okay, is everybody seeing how that works?
Yep.
So that's very useful if you have, let's say, like a baseline that you never want to get corrupted or moved somehow inadvertently. It's a good idea to keep that layer locked up. And that way you can still use it. I can still snap to these objects, but I just cannot offset them. I can't fillet them. I can't move them. I can't do any of that stuff. Okay. Questions?
Nope.
Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and we'll unlock everything. So here's a good question. And a lot of people, maybe you're thinking about that right now. Let's say you're on layer 4 right now, okay? And you draw a rectangle. Go out and just draw me a rectangle. And you notice that it's blue and it's got that phantom, and you realize, you know, I really wanted that on a different layer. I don't want that on layer 4. Let's say you want it on layer 3. So it's very simple to move an object from one layer to another. And that's one thing about an object, it cannot be on multiple layers at a time. So this thing can't exist on layer 4 and layer 3. But I can move it from one layer to another. So all you have to do is click on the object. It highlights. Up here, it also shows you what layer it's on. If you open this box and say, I really want to move it to layer 2, it moved it. And then when you're done, make sure you hit the escape key to deselect it. So that object is now moved from the layer it was created on to the layer that you wanted it on. Is that working for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty important thing to know how to do, because very often when you're drawing, you're not thinking about switching layers and making them current. In fact, I do this all the time. I don't really worry about what layer is current. I'll just move things when I get a chance later on. So it just depends on what I'm doing. Okay, so that's an important way of moving things. I'm going to show you another way how to do that later on. Okay. All right, we're going to investigate what we call transparency. Okay, so in order to do this, what we're going to do is let's set layer 0, the current layer. So that's our white layer, and it's also a continuous line type. What I want to do is find an objects that are a bunch of objects like that are crossing like right in this area. We're going to draw a real big donut on top of all of that. So I want you to go to the donut command. I'm going to draw a donut. Let's make the inside diameter 0. Let's make the outside diameter, I'm just going to guess it maybe 5. Okay, so just slap a donut a couple places so that you can see that it's on top of objects. Can everybody get those donuts in?
Yep.
So what do you notice about the lines that are in there interacting with it? Can you see them?
No.
It's sitting on top, right?
Yeah.
And actually it is sitting on top. I'm going to show you how we can swap that. So if you would just click on your donut, it'll highlight. And I want you to right click. And right about in the middle of the shortcut, you'll notice there's draw order. If we send the donut to the back, and then you hit the escape key, notice what's happened now. Can you see the objects on top of it?
Yes.
Okay. This is not the same thing as transparency, but it is a way of handling things, because as objects are created, even though they're exactly in the same Z value, there's a time differential between when one is created and the other one's created. And the last object you create is always sitting on top of the objects that were created earlier. Okay, so by swapping the draw order, what you can do is manipulate that. So if you plotted this right now, you would actually see these guys coming through that donut, whereas you can see this one's covering them up. Okay. All right, so let's flip the draw order back on this. So I'm going to go ahead and click this guy, right click, and we're going to set the draw order. We're going to bring him to the front. Okay. Is that good for everybody?
Yeah.
So we're going to go to the layer properties manager this time. And for layer 0, I want you to go to transparency. When you click on transparency, you'll notice it's 0. So that means it's completely non-transparent or opaque. So what we're going to do is bump that number up a little bit. You can just type in 50 if you want. Go ahead and hit OK. And close this box. And what are you noticing now about that donut?
You can see through.
Right, and it's not a draw order issue, okay? What you're doing is you're making it transparent, okay? Because you'll notice that this guy is really not sitting on top of that, okay? It's behind it. And if we go back in there and set that transparency up to the highest, which is 90, you'll notice it's pretty transparent, okay? It's still there, but it hardly has much of a value to it. And when you plot, if you're using a plotter, you can plot with transparency. So your plotter will also recognize that. Okay? Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay, so those are layers. Oh, one other thing. Let's go back in. Let's go back in and set that transparency back to, we'll go ahead and set it back to 0. Okay. So the last thing we've taken a look at on, off, freestyle, lock, unlock, coloring, line types, line weight. We didn't take a look at, but line weight I don't use a whole lot. And usually I'm going to probably do that more with P-lines still. The other thing is about it, it doesn't really show up on the screen the way it will really look. So it's kind of a hard, it's a kind of a hard property to use actually. But this one's important. This is the guy that we call plot, no plot. What I'd like you to do is go into layer 1 and click on that printer, and you get a little do not symbol, and you click on the printer here, and we click on the printer here. Go ahead and close that. So you notice as we look at the drawing here, it didn't affect anything that we're looking at here. Is everybody seeing that? But it does affect it when you print it, okay? So we're gonna look at this real quick to show you how this would show up to you, okay? So we're gonna go up to the printer here, and just go ahead and select if you have a printer. Well, I'll tell you what, we're just going to go down here and we're going to do this as a PDF. So go towards the bottom and you could do DWG to PDF. Okay, so that'll just grab that. Don't worry about the paper size, just tell it to do the extents. Tell it to fit the paper. Tell it to center the plot. Now what I really want you to do is go ahead and preview it. Do you notice that half your drawing is missing?
Oh yeah.
Is everybody seeing that?
Mm-hmm.
The layers that were set to no plot are not going to show up in here, okay? So they're still, objects are still there, they're still on the screen, but they're not showing up in the print dialog. So when I create this PDF, that's the picture I'm going to get. So you do kind of have to be careful with this, because I've had issues where you get your whole drawing set to no plot, and then you go in and try to plot it and nothing shows up. That's usually your issue. So you can just go ahead and hit the escape key, and we'll cancel that, okay? So be careful. Make sure you don't have things no plot if you don't really want them no plot, because they definitely will bite you, okay? So another thing you can do, which is really cool, is if you want to change all of the objects on a layer very rapidly, you can do that by just clicking on the layer, going to the color property, and say, I want that not to be cyan, but I want it to be yellow. And instead of using a zigzag line type, let's say I want to use tracks. So if I just select those changes, click out of here, the objects that were on that layer before are still on that layer. They've just inherited the new properties. Okay, is that working?
Yep.
Real nice way of making a mass change across all objects. Okay. All right, any questions so far?
Nope.
Okay, so we're going to look at properties that are associated with objects. So we looked at properties that are associated with layers. Let's just go do that real quick again. A name, a visibility state, on, off, freestyle, lock, plot, no plot, color, line type, line weight, transparency. Okay, so those are called layer properties. Okay, so we're going to close that box. I want you to click on an object, doesn't matter, any object, and right click, and you'll go to this guy called properties at the bottom, and you can open up this little box right here. Okay, is everybody getting that box to open up for them?
Yes.
Anybody not?
Could you go over that one more time?
Absolutely. Okay. So Nick, let's see. You just click on an object. Don't worry about which one it is, okay? You did that? Right click. You get a shortcut menu. At the bottom of the shortcut, hit the properties, and it should open up
I
this.
see.
Got it now?
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it floats differently, so it may be docked over on the side. So you can float this
Yeah,
guy
mine's
out.
docked.
Yeah, and that's okay. It is kind of a screen hog, actually. So if you're not using it, I get rid of it, okay? You can just dismiss it really easy by just hitting that X. But what I want you to notice right here under the general principles, properties, these are what are called object properties. And I want you to notice they have commonality with layer properties. So notice there's a color here and a color over here. There's a line type here and a line type there. Plot, line weight, transparency. So these properties and these properties can override each other. So you have to be really careful. If you set a color to your object, it will override the color of the layer. If you set a line type on the object, it will override the layer property. And if you set transparency or line weight, these guys will also override. So you basically have two ways of doing things. Either via the layers, which is the way most people do it, because it's the best way of doing changes very rapidly, or you can set it up on an object. And I'm going to show you that process, and then just to show you that you can do it, and then it's kind of it can be a mess. So let's go ahead. We're going to just close this guy right here. And mine got quick props showing up. So I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so over here, you should note, if that thing's still highlighted, you can just de-highlight it. Over here, you can notice this box marked properties. And first off, there's a little down arrow right here. That's another way to get to the properties dialog box really rapidly. Okay, so you don't have to click on an object and right click. You can just grab that anytime you want it. Okay, but what we want to look at here is this is your color box, this is your line weight box, and this is your line type. And I believe you'll also, if you open that up, you'll see transparency in there as well. Okay. So the properties in here, these properties are not layer properties, these are object properties, okay? So right now, everything is set to by layer, by layer, by layer. So what that means is that these guys, anything you draw is gonna be inherited by the layer or come from the layer. So we're gonna override that. We're gonna go to this color box and I want you to set it to magenta. Notice it no longer says by layer, okay? And we're going to go to a line type here, and we're going to find a line type called hot water supply. So what's going to happen is these properties are going to be taken on by the object as you draw, okay? So I would like you to make sure your layer is set to the 0 layer right now, which is, I've got a property of white and a line type of continuous. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, go draw a circle, and what you should notice is that circle is not white and it is not continuous. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
Well, what layer is it on?
0.
It's on the 0 layer. If you click on that object and you move him from the 0 layer to layer 1, which is red, notice it stays magenta and it stays to the hot water supply line type. Okay, this is what we call a mess. And this can be a real issue when you're working with CAD files, especially from other people. A lot of people don't understand layers, and so they just kind of hack their way through and figure out how to do colors, because there's this big nice color thing over here and how to do two line types, but they're not doing it the way most people in the industry do it. Most people do everything through layers over here, okay? So your best bet to fix this is to never work over here, okay, essentially. And what I'm going to do is set this back to what's called bilayer and set that back to bilayer as well, okay? So you pretty much really always want these to say bilayer, 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 okay? And to fix this guy, we're going to click on him and we're going to right click, go to properties, and for color, you're going to make his color bilayer. You're going to make his line type bilayer. And that should fix that guy. And then if you move him, he'll be good to go. Okay, so notice now he's red and he's center, and that's the layer I moved him to. If I click him and move him to another layer, you'll notice he takes on those characteristics. Okay, so you have object properties, which are primarily these guys, and you have layer properties, which is this guy group right here. And again, this is the way that most people do it. It makes the most sense. It gives you the most control, the most flexibility. I mean, I will tell you, there are occasions you want to have a green object on a red layer, but not too often. Okay, it's just occasionally it's okay, but not, you're not going to use that a lot. Okay, everybody seeing that?
Yep.
Okay. There's a cool little tool here too when you're talking about properties. This guy up here called Match Props is a really nice little guy. If you would click on that tool right there. So what this allows you to do is match a property of one object, what they call the source object, to destination. So if you click over here on this yellow object, and then you get this little paint brush that shows up. If you click on any of these other objects, it takes on those properties. Okay, so this is a real nice way of setting things up. And everybody getting that to work, because that's a really great tool.
Yep.
And one of the things you can do, it's kind of cool, if you go to Match Props, you select a source object. If you go to Settings, it will allow you to tell you what to match and what not to match. So if you want it to match the layer but not the color, you can override things in here. So notice right now everything is set to match everything, but I can toggle things on and off. Okay. So that's an awesome little tool, and it's great the way it works once you understand it. Okay. Any questions? We're all okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to take a look at something called line type scale. Okay. And line type scale is a little bit confusing. There are, first of all, two types of line type scales. And what a line type scale is, it's a multiplier on the way these guys are going to look to you. So why don't you zoom up on the screen so you can see some of the line types like I have here. So you'll notice these guys have a spacing on them right here. So that might be a 1/2 inch and then a 1/2 inch space, and then maybe an inch object and then a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch. And okay, so that spacing can be increased or decreased basically by multiplying a line type scale on it. So if we go down to the command line and we type in the word line type LTS or line type scale, okay, you can use either LTS or line type scale and hit enter. It'll show you that you have a current scale setting of 1. Okay, so that's literally just 1 times whatever that scale of that drawing or that line type is created at. So these line types all have an original spacing associated with them. So like I said, it could be a quarter inch, half, 1 inch, quarter, and it just repeats. Okay. So if you want to make that spacing bigger, you could type in 2 and hit enter, and you notice that everything got twice as big. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
If you do that enough times, so if I go into LT scale, or just remember LTS is really nice, set it to like 10, some of those line types may actually disappear because they're too big to fit on the objects. I haven't gotten that to happen yet, but if I did that maybe again, maybe 25, yeah, that line type disappeared and that line type disappeared because the spacing is too big to fit on the object. Okay? If you go the other way, like say 0.5, you're going to make it half as big, so it's a lot more dense. Okay. So everybody see how that's working? It's just a direct multiplier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so here's where it gets a little involved. If you click, let's just click on one of those objects that has line types and right click and go to properties. Okay. You'll notice that there's a line type scale factor in there as well. That is called the object line type scale factor. And when I was typing line type scale at the command line, that was called the global line type scale factor. So the way these work is the global multiplies the object, and those two multiplied together multiply this. So what most people do to keep it simple is the object line type scale factor always has a value of 1, and then you just adjust the global scale factor, which is down here. Okay, so let me say that again. The object has a line type scale factor. The global is one that you can set, and these two guys multiply times each other to give you the effective value here. So if this was set to 2 and that was set to 2, the factor here would be 4, okay, because they multiply. And again, we normally want to leave this set to 1, okay? So let me show you something here. Go ahead and we'll cancel that, escape out of here. Type in the word line type for me. All one word, line type, hit enter. And it should pull up the line type manager for you. Okay. So this is another way to load line types, okay? Or you can also, by the way, delete line types if you're not using them in a drawing. But if you go to the Show Details button, you'll notice it'll show you a global scale factor and a current object scale factor, okay? Always leave this set to 1. Okay, that's and it's there by default. So unless you go in there and change that, you're not going to mess it up, okay? It's by default set to 1, and it's kind of hard to get to this point if you don't know how to get to it, okay? But when you're typing in the word scale LTS, what you're setting is this, which is called the global, okay? So the global times the current object, those get multiplied together. Any questions on that?
No.
Okay, cancel out of there. We're going to look at another box here called line weight. Line weight. Select that, and this will show you your current line weight settings. And notice it says that your units is listed in either millimeters or inches. So if you go to inches, you'll notice it just changes, and you have different values. So you can go up to a maximum of 0.083 or up to I think your smallest is 0. I do want you to notice that your default value is not 0. Does everybody notice that? It actually has some value to it. And the reason is that if you have a 0 line weight, you'll be able to see it on the screen, but when you set that and send that object to the printer, it almost disappears. So an object has to have some line weight for the printer to be able to pick it up. So again, most of the time you're probably using a default value. Okay. Any questions on that? Probably won't mess with this too much. Okay, is everybody all right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, covered a lot here. Let's see if there's any questions, anybody. And most of it's pretty straightforward, I think. Once you start working with these, you'll see. Anybody, did I generate any questions for anybody on anything? Okay, so one of the things you'll find, if you guys start working in CAD a lot, everything happens in layers, okay? You always fracture your drawing out in layers, so you just don't use a single layer. And the other thing that CAD operators actually do is they never draw on the 0 layer. The 0 layer is got a lot of special properties to it, so it's a good one to keep clean and not ever use. So, and I know we've been violating that since the very beginning, and that's okay because we're not doing anything complex. But if you do get drawings from people out in industry, a lot of times they won't be using the 0 layer that much. Okay. And by the way, it's not uncommon on a mapping project to have 200 layers or 300 layers. As I said, you'll see that in GIS. In GIS, you're going to have color, you're going to have line types, you're going to have all of the same stuff that you're seeing in CAD, even though it's just a tad bit different of a way of doing things. Okay. Questions? Okay, so we're going to we can just go ahead and delete things. So I'm just going to say erase all and take everything out. Okay, and if it didn't delete, it might be that you had something frozen or you had something protected and it wasn't able to do it. So you might want to look at your layers and make sure that they're there. Okay, so by the way, too, and I probably mentioned to say this, if you save this drawing, the layers automatically save. So you're not going to have to create these every time. If you start a new drawing, though, these layers will not be in there. So they're only there in this drawing, okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the last topic we're going to talk about tonight before we get into looking at the assignment that we're going to be working on is talking about the UCS a little bit. And that's this crater down over here, okay? So the UCS is basically just a little icon that shows us the direction of positive X space, which is going in this direction, positive Y space going in this direction, and positive Z, which is coming towards you, and that's what that box is indicating. So positive Z is heading towards your direction. So it's kind of important when you're drawing to understand that, but that thing can also be utilized to do other things, which is pretty nice. So the first thing we want to take a look at is how to control the look of the UCS. And that is done through a command called UCS icon. So we're going to go into the UCS icon command. Okay, so that's all one word. And go ahead and hit enter. Okay, and you will get sub options that show up. All right, is that everybody okay with that?
Yep.
So we have, notice, on, off, all, no origin, origin, selectable, or properties. Okay, so let's go to properties first, and you'll get a little dialog box that'll pop up. And so you can set up in here different styles of your UCS. So if you want to use a 2D icon, you can click on the 2D button. It'll look like that, very stripped down. 3D, particularly when you're looking in 3D views, this is a nice one to have. You can change the line width. You can change the icon size, which that 50 represents the number of pixels that that's being displayed with. And you can also change the color. So notice it's white right now in model space. You could make that red if you wanted to. So if I get out of here, notice that's red. There's also what's called a layout tab UCS icon. So if you click on the layout tab, you'll see that goes differently, but we're not going to work with that one. We're going to just work with this model one tonight. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and set that back to white. That's the one I'm used to. So that was ways to make it look different. Now here's some other things you can do with that command. Go ahead and type that back in, UCS icon. So let's look at what these do. On means that it's going to be visible on the screen. If you set it off, notice it disappears. Okay, so it's still there. It's just that you don't see it graphically. Okay, so if you're not ever using your UCS icon, that is something you might consider. I mean, it is a virtual object. It never shows up on a drawing when you print it. But if you're using it, then it's not a good thing to do. So let's go back in. We'll turn it back on. And that should be back on for you. Okay, let's go back into that command. So we have what is set to no origin and origin. Okay, so here's the difference between those two. If you set your UCS to no origin, it will always stay over in this lower left corner. So my origin currently is where this green line and this red line are coming together, but it's not sitting on the origin because it can't. If I zoom out, notice it jumps to it, but when I do a zoom extents, or if I go back, it'll hug that corner. Okay, so if you have it set to an origin setting, it'll always jump to the origin when it can, and if it can't, it always goes back in the corner. Okay, if you have that set to no origin, it'll never move to the origin. It's always going to stay right there. So preferred to me, I prefer it to say origin, because I like to know when I see it that I've got my origin set. Okay, so everybody see that, how that works?
Yep.
Okay, so selectable, some of you guys might have figured this out. What this means is that if you click on your UCS, it'll actually highlight and you can move it. If you don't want that to happen, which kind of protects it, then you could set that to not selectable by saying no. So if I come over here and click on this, it won't do anything now because I've turned it off. Okay, but that's if I'm using my UCS a lot, that's kind of not a great thing. Okay, so I'm going to go back into my UCS and show you what happens if we make it selectable. And this only occurred about 4 releases ago, and the first time that was a selectable UCS icon, I wasn't used to it, and I went and clicked on it, and it actually highlighted. All right, so if you set it back to a selectable state, you should be able to click on that UCS, and you notice it highlights, and you get these blue grips. So this grip right here allows you to move your UCS, and this grip right here allows you to rotate it. Is everybody getting that to work?
Yep.
So I can move it, and I can rotate it. Do you notice what's happening with your grid? Everybody seen how your grid is moving to line up with it?
Yep.
Okay. If your UCS is still highlighted, just hit the escape key. Does anybody notice any difference to the look of the UCS now than what it was when we initiated it?
No Z box.
Right. Okay. That's absolutely right. There is no box here. So it doesn't mean you don't have a Z-ness anymore. What it means is you are not using the original UCS. This is called a true user UCS. Okay. The other type of UCS is called a world UCS. So the world UCS exists as a frame of reference that you can never corrupt in AutoCAD, and you can always go back to it. But this one currently right now is not in the world. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to fix that. Just type in the word UCS, and hit enter. I did it wrong. I did USC, that isn't a command. UCS. Do you notice there's a bunch of sub options here, right? But the default is world, so all you have to do is just hit enter. It should bring you back to the normal grid, and you should get your little Z box, which tells you you're back in the world. Okay? Did everybody get that to work?
Yep.
So here's where it's going to get interesting for us. So why do we have the ability to manipulate that UCS? Well, the answer is so that you can work off of objects that aren't necessarily parallel with either this line or this line. So for instance, let's just take and draw a line anywhere on the screen. Okay, so I just want to draw a line anywhere like that. Okay, so I have no idea what angle that line is with respect to the UCS. So if I'm trying to define things off of this line, I really can't do that very easily, okay? But what I can do is have my UCS match this line so that the X line is parallel with this line and the Y is going to be perpendicular to it. And what that allows me to do is work in a grid system that is conducive to this line and not necessarily conducive to this grid. So very simply, all we have to do is go into UCS and hit enter. Now notice there's a lot of sub options, okay? But this is one of the coolest ones here. It's called object. So if you click on object and you just come up here and select the object, you should notice that the UCS aligned right up with that. So that thing is perfectly parallel with it. Whatever that angle was, it's already parallel with it now. And when you do certain applications, you're working off of that UCS now, as opposed to the world, okay? The other thing to understand too is that everything that you do in AutoCAD is always referenced back to the world. So no matter what current UCS you're working in, everything's going to be referenced back to the world coordinate system when you get done. Okay. So let's do this. Let's put a couple more lines in. I'm going to put another line here and another line here. So I can work on this grid system off of this line, go into the UCS object, work on the grid when I'm over here. Then if I want to do another UCS object, I can just rotate it to here. So each time I want to work within that specific grid system, I can do that very rapidly. And if you're doing, say, like a 3D object, you can rotate the UCS so it's on a vertical face or it's on an angled face. So this is a very powerful little tool once you get into it. And we're going to be utilizing this on this next assignment. So that's kind of why we are going to introduce this tonight. Okay, did everybody get this to work?
Yep.
Okay, so let's take our UCS back to the world. UCS, all I have to do is type in UCS, enter, and then do another enter. It automatically takes you back to the world. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at the assignment. I hope that you guys all had a chance to open that up, or if not, you should be able to get that. I've got out here on your, let's see, on this, whoops, where did I put that? Okay, so if we go to, let's go to weeks here. Under your weeks, you should have, under week 4, you should have your assignment 4. So let's go ahead and open that up. We'll take a look at that. Okay, so we are going to be really doing a map tonight. And this map is going to be set to, first of all, a different paper size than we've used before, which is called 11 by 17. Some people call that B-size paper. Letter is usually referred to as A-size paper. So we're going to be doing it on 11 by 17, which really won't affect anything that you guys do because we're not plotting. But if we were plotting, we would have to plot that to 11 by 17 size sheets. Okay. We are going to be utilizing a decimal unit when we do this tonight. One of the things we're using decimal in this process is because most mappers actually work in decimal units, as opposed I've had you use back and forth between feet and inches and all that stuff, but most mappers use decimal. And when we use decimal, we assume that 1 decimal unit is 1 foot. Okay, so that's going to be the assumption we're going to be working on tonight. 1 decimal unit is equal to 1 foot. The reality of that is not true. Actually, 1 decimal unit is 1 inch. Okay. We're also going to be utilizing the surveyor's units part of the time, and then we're going to be kind of going back and forth between things. Ultimately, we're going to be utilizing layers, drawing some things up, and so let me show you the picture. The picture we're looking at here, this is the final picture. This is what we're going to be drawing, okay? So we're going to have a border, a title block, a north arrow, and we've got this boundary. So we're going to go in and put a boundary in. We have an edge of pavement and a center line. We've got some objects that we're going to locate from field notes. We have this existing foundation. We have a tank. And we also have test holes that we're going to be utilizing, okay? So we're going to be getting all that information from these different sheets that we're going to flow through, okay? So first thing we're going to do is set up your units, and these are going to be the coordinates that you're going to use for your upper and lower left corner of your limits. So notice we're not setting it at 0, 0, okay? And the reason is because we're working in a mapping type of format, and mappers use very large coordinates. So we almost never use 0, 0. Okay, and you're going to see the same thing when you get into the GIS kind of stuff as well. Okay, is everybody with me so far?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll go in and set these layers up, and I want you to create some layers. Now, remember, you're going to already have the 0 layer there, but you're not going to use it. So you're going to have a border layer, your border, and your title block, and your north arrow are going to go on this layer. You're going to have a boundary layer for your property lines, a control layer for what we call the control polygon, structure, center, pavement, and test hole. And they'll have all unique colors: white, blue, red, green, cyan, there's 8, and magenta, and then you're going to have line types. So you will have to go out and load phantom, dashed, center, and hidden, and your best bet is to just load all of your line types into your drawing at one time. Okay, is everybody with me on that?
Yep.
Okay, so we've done this before. You're going to draw a boundary using the coordinate and bearing and distance information. So this is a polar coordinate kind of thing. So if we go to this picture right here, what we're talking about is, notice this is showing you the limits corner, lower left corner, and the upper right corner of your limits, okay? Now in your picture, mine is rotated 90 degrees. Yours will actually be, this will actually be parallel with your X. This is just the way this drawing came in, okay? This is the starting coordinate for your boundary. Okay, so you're going to draw this on the boundary layer. You've got starting coordinates. You're going to go around this thing using that, using that, using that, using that bearing. And then you're going to come up with this bearing as well. And then you've got a little arc in here. So how are we going to put this arc in here? Anybody tell me?
The 2 endpoints of the line and then the radius at 14.
You could. Anybody want to suggest a better way? That could work, Craig.
You can use
Oh,
fillet.
Yes,
Fillet.
you want to use the fillet. And when you want to do the fillet, all you're going to do is set your radius equal to 14. Okay.
That's right.
So that's going to be really, if you have a chance to use an arc and you don't have a chance, just never use your arc. Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just don't do it. All right. So now here's the thing. When you're typing this in right here, okay, you need to understand this. This thing is actually going around counterclockwise, okay? So you may have to swap where it says southeast. If you type this in, this line's going to want to go this way on you, okay? So you can make this northwest if you want to go that way, or you can enter it as a negative distance, okay? Best bet is to just probably swap these to northwest and swap that to northeast and swap that to southeast. Does everybody see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
If you type them in the way you see them, they're going to go mirror image down over here, okay? And it's not that it's wrong, it's just that this thing is set to start at that point, and then it goes around counterclockwise, okay? But you should figure that out pretty readily. Is everybody okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so notice that object right there is the boundary. So it's going to be a property line, it's going to be blue, and it's going to be phantom, okay? So that's what this guy is. That's a property line. So you want to get this guy first. And let me explain this too. If you get this wrong, anything that comes off of this will be wrong. So this line that you're coming off of here, what command will we use to pull this center line in? Anybody know?
Offset.
Yes. So you're going to offset this 25 feet and that 30. So if these lines are wrong, these lines are going to be wrong too. Okay. So just kind of watch that. By the way, this is your center line right here. Okay. So that's a center line and that's a center line. Okay. So those should be on the center line layer, which is up here. You see center line layer, that'll be cyan and it'll have a center line type. Okay. So that's what it tells you to do in 4. Okay, in 5, it tells you to draw the control polygon, which is 0.1, 0.2, and 0.3 using coordinates. So this is easy. You just come down here. This is your control polygon, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. And you just type in those coordinates. And you're just going to draw a line from this point to this point to this point to back. You can't miss. But if you do screw up one of these points here, what's going to happen, anything you plot from these lines is not going to work. Okay? So make sure that you get these right. Okay? So your boundary has to be right and your points here. Now, again, if you're typing in these coordinates, it shouldn't be a problem. Okay? These 3 lines are what we call the control, and they are going to be on the control layer. So they should be red, and they should be a continuous line type. Okay, is everybody with me on that?
Yeah.
All right, so the next 6 and 7 kind of go together. So let me kind of show you what's going on here. You're going to go into units. And you're going to set your units up to an angle type of degree, minute, and second. Precision's not that critical, but you are going to go into this checkbox under the units and check that to clockwise. Then you're going to go into PD mode, set it 35, and PD size and set it to 3. So literally to do this is going to set your point up, your point style. Just type in the word PD mode, set 35, okay? And then for PD size, you just type that in and set that to 3. And it's important that you do that step right there, clear all running node snaps. If you don't do that, you're gonna have problems, okay? Let me bop over to AutoCAD here real quick. So what I'm doing is I'm going into units when I get to that step, and up here, I'm gonna set this to degrees, minutes, and seconds, okay? There's your clockwise checkbox. So these 2 things are going to be critical, okay, when you get to start doing those point plots. Is everybody with me?
Yes.
For the PD mode, you just type in the word PD mode and hit enter. It'll show you a current setting. you're going to type in 35 and hit enter. For PD size, you just type that in and you go, I forget what the size was there, but you're going to put the size that I have in there for you, okay? What that will do is that will set up the look of your points so that they will look like X's and they will have a certain size to them, okay? When you get done, you're going to also set it to another one. You're going to get this kind of style on there as well, okay? All right, is everybody okay with that so far?
Mhm.
So here's how we're going to use these notes. And this is where the UCS is going to come in. So it says using the given field notes, you're going to plot AutoCAD points given using horizontal angles and horizontal distances. And what you're going to do is set the UCS current to what you've got there. So notice this says instrument is at 0.3 backside 1. So what this is referring to, an instrument, is it's a surveying instrument. And out in the field, what you do when you're locating stuff, you're setting up at a control point and doing what we call backside another control point. So that's literally just like taking a protractor and aligning it along a line. And then you're turning an angle. That would be this angle, and that would be this distance, okay? So if you go, let's see, that says instrument at 0.3, backside 0.1. So if we go to here, what we're literally doing, it says instrument at 3, backside 1. You're going to basically click on this line using the UCS command object. The UCS should be right here. And notice there's going to be your 0.50 and 51. Okay, does everybody see what I'm getting at? And I'll run you through an example here. Okay, is everybody okay with that?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so then when you're done with those 2 points, it says, okay, now you're going to go from 0.1 to 0.3. So what you're going to do is come down here, go into the UCS object, click on the line closest to 1. It'll align your UCS differently, and you'll plot points from this point, okay? So notice you'll be plotting, let's see, 52, 100, 101, and 102. So this little diagram right here is your guide. When you're plotting points, if it doesn't look like this, you've got something wrong. Now, you won't see these lines in here until later, okay? But you're just going to see all these little points scattered throughout. Okay, is everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going to do that. You've got several different setups. 3 backside 1, 1 backside 3, 2 backside 1, 2 backside 3, okay? So once you get those plotted, what you're going to do is construct the features through them. So like for instance, I've got 3 points that are associated with this tank here, 50, 51, and 52. So does anybody know how I'm going to draw this tank based on those 3 points? Nobody has a clue?
Use.
Say that again.
Oh, sorry. Would you use the not the tangent? It's one of the O snaps, right?
Well, you're going to use an O snap. That's important, okay? And I didn't talk about that. But what command would you use to actually draw that circle?
A 3-point circle.
Absolutely, a 3-point circle, okay? 3-point circle. So now then, someone mentioned the word O snap, and that's another thing. These guys are point objects, okay? They're point objects. So there's an O snap in AutoCAD called a node. And you're going to set that node as your current O snap so that when you touch on these guys, they'll come in for you, okay? So you're going to have points down here, construct a line right here. This is your back edge of pavement. This is your structure for your foundation, and this is your tank object. So let's do this. I'm going to go into AutoCAD with you. We're going to just draw a couple of those lines, and I'm going to show you how to type these in, okay? So let's go to AutoCAD. And I'm going to just begin a brand new drawing. So I'm going to clear the one I'm in. Maybe. It's trying. Okay. So I'm going to just enter a brand new drawing. Okay. So I'm going to go in. We're going to set up some units real quick. I'm just going to put in point 1, 2, and 3 for the control network. Okay. So if you've got your layer set up, or you can just create a layer as you go with me. I'm just going to create a layer, and I'm going to call it control. And that control layer, according to this sheet, is supposed to be red. And I'm going to create a secondary layer. We're going to call it structure. And this is supposed to be green. And it is supposed to have a dashed line type. So I'm going to go ahead and load this. Dashed line type. Okay. Is that good for everybody?
Yep.
All right, go ahead and set the control layer current. All right, so we're going to go in and set the units up, units, and then we're going to set the limits up real quick. Okay, so actually limits or units are good for now, so let's leave those alone. Now we're going to go into limits. And it tells you to set your lower left corner. Your lower left corner of your limits is to be set to 2450, comma 7250. So lower left is 2450, 7250. And the upper right is to be 2775, comma 7452. Okay. After you've done that, go ahead and do a zoom all. So what that should do is reference your, this is referencing the size of where we're drawing. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and just do a rectangle right now. Don't worry, it's going to be on the control layer, but you know, you can move that later on when you do your drawing. Your border should be on the border layer. Okay. So let's go ahead and we're going to do a rectangle using those same values that we just typed in. 2450, comma 7250. That's your lower left, and your upper right is going to be at 2775, comma 7452. So you should see a rectangle in place just like this. Is everybody doing okay?
Yep.
Anybody problems so far?
Can you go back to line setup again?
To the limits?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
having some issues with the
No
line
problem.
types.
You're just typing in the word limits, right? And hitting enter. What's your lower left say, Nick?
So I got it at 0, right now.
Okay, so set it to 2450. Just type in 2450, comma 7250. And then hit enter. And let me know if that worked.
Okay.
And then you type in 2775, comma 7452, and I'm getting that from the paper. Okay, so that's all on your handout sheet. Okay. Did you do that?
Yeah.
All right. So now type in Z enter, A enter to do a zoom all, and what that should, you should see your screen grid diminish a lot.
Okay.
A lot smaller squares, right?
Right.
Okay, so that probably did it right. So now you're going to go into the rectangle command and do exactly the same numbers. The 2450, comma 7250 for the lower left corner of the rectangle, and the upper right was the 2775, 7452. We doing okay?
Yeah, I just have one issue though with the line type. It's like I couldn't get my my type to work out with the colors.
So go to your layer properties.
Okay.
Do you have a control layer in there?
Right. Yeah, I got that.
And you got red?
Yeah, it's red.
Does it have a green check in front of it?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, so you're on the 0 layer. Okay.
Okay.
No big deal. Just go ahead and click on the control layer right now, and then it should say control when you come out here.
Okay.
Your box is still white, right?
Yeah.
That's no problem. Okay, no problem. You can move that stuff around later. And actually, it should be on the border layer anyway. Shouldn't be red. Okay.
Okay.
It actually should be white. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. We're going to put control point 3 and control point 1 in. So I'm going to go into the line command. Now I'm skipping the whole boundary. You guys should know how to do that. But if you have questions, you can certainly pose them to me, later or whatever. Okay. All right, so we're going to go into point 3. So you're just going to, at the line command, when it asks you first point, type in 2511, comma 7433, and hit enter. You should notice it's kind of in the upper left-hand side of your rectangle. And then we're going to go 2490, comma 7339, and hit enter. Okay, and then when you're done, you're going to hit enter. So we're not going to put the whole control. Well, let's see. Tell you what. Yeah, maybe we will. Let's do the other line. So we're going to go back into the line command. My bad. Sorry. Let's go back into the line command. Just snap to the last endpoint that you did, and we're going to do the other point, which is point 2, 2658, comma 7358, and then hit enter. And if you want to snap it closed, you can. That's your control network. Okay. Is that working for everybody?
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to do 2 things here. We're going to set, well, 3 things. I'm going to have you set the layer up to layer structure. So you can either do what I just did, or you can just open this guy up, set him to structure. So it should say it's green. We're going to go into units. We go into the units command. We're going to set the angle type to degrees, minutes, seconds, and we're going to toggle on clockwise. And we're going to hit OK. Okay. Is that good?
Yes.
We are going to go into PD mode. Just type in the word PD mode and set it to 35. You're going to go into PD size. Just type in PD size and set it to 3. So what that's going to do is set up the point style, and it's also going to set up the point size. And I talked about that, I believe, in lecture 2. So if you want to review that, you can. There was another way we set it, but that's the easiest way to set it. So I want you to go down here to the O snaps, open that up to settings, and hit what's called clear all. So that gets rid of all your O snaps, and then hit OK. That's important also. Okay, ready?
Yep.
So we are going to now go into the UCS, and we're going to set the UCS so it's coincident with this line, but we want the origin to be here, and then we're going to flip that when we do the second time. Okay, so the first time we're going to go a UCS object, click it up here, then we're going to do UCS object and click it here. Okay, so I'm going to go UCS object and click it towards the top one, so it should look like that.
Yeah.
So what this is saying is this is where your instrument is, and this is what we call backsighting. So if you know on your notes, it says instrument at 3, this is 3, backsight 1. So we're going to put in point 50 and 51, okay? So the way you can do this, you can go over here to draw, and there is this guy called multiple points. Multiple points. So to specify this point, since we are working everything off of this origin, we don't need the @ symbol. So we're used to using that @ symbol, but you won't do it in this case. So the distance for the first point 50 is 42.15. So you're going to type in 42.15 less than the angle, which is 291 degrees, 71 minutes, 16 seconds. So we're going to type in 291D, 17 minutes, 16 seconds. Okay. So 291D, 17 minutes, 16 seconds. Once you type that in, you should hit enter. And you should see a point appear over here. Okay. Is that working?
Yes.
And notice it still says specify point. So now we can do 51. So that has a distance of 33.3 less than 347 degrees, 41 minutes, 23 seconds. Hit enter, and you should see a second point come in. Okay, we getting the idea?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are done setting points from this point, so just hit enter. It'll actually, I think you have to hit the escape key. Hit the escape key, it'll terminate that setup. We're going to now move the UCS, so the instrument is going to be here. We're going to backsight here. So we're going to go back to UCS, object. You're going to select this object and notice how it's flipped it. Okay. So basically it's just flipped. That was where the occupied point was last time. Now it's here. So we're going to plot point 52. This was point 50. That's 51. Now we're going to do 52, which are the 3 points on that tank. Okay. So I'm going to go back into the multiple point command. For that first point, it's 50.86 feet less than 62 degrees, 37 minutes, and 01 seconds. Hit enter. And that should be your 3 points. Okay? Everybody with me?
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead and hit the escape key. Now, once you're eventually done plotting all those points, you'll want to set your UCS back to the world. So how would you do that?
Type in UCS and then hit that. Enter twice.
Yep. UCS, enter, enter. So notice I'm back to the world. Okay. And we are now ready to set our tank. So the tank is going to be a 3-point circle that's going to come through these 3 points. And so I'm going to go into my OSNAPs, and I'm going to set the OSNAP current to what's called a node OSNAP. This will just make it simple. And make sure that it turns on. Okay, is that good for everybody?
Yep.
All right, so now we're going to go to circle 3-point. Select your first node, second node, and third node. And you should see your circle come in. You guys getting the idea now?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to do that for, you've got pavement that you're going to do that for. You have a old foundation that you're going to do that for. And you have 4 test holes. Okay. So that when you get done, your final picture will look like this. Now notice I don't have all of my points showing up here. So the way you can handle that, I mean, you can leave all your points on if you want, but if what I did was actually created another layer with the points that I didn't want to see, just move those points to that layer and froze it. But you don't need to freeze. I mean, you can leave all of your points out if you want to, okay? So when you get done, you have boundary, you have a border, you have a title block, you have a north arrow, center line, edge of pavement, boundary. These are your 4 test holes. This is your foundation, and this is your tank. You notice also that that tank's line type scale is different than that line type scale that we just drew.
Mm-hmm.
All right, the reason is because we have to set the line type scale factor, and I got you doing that on step 9. It tells you to set your line type scale factor to 20. So you just type in LTS, hit enter, and set that to 20, and that should change that for you, okay? So this one might be a little challenging for people. And if you get into the point where you have issues, just email me. I can set you up a Zoom session. You know, I'll be glad to work with you guys independently. Okay, we'll go through it. It is going to primarily be dealing with layers, colors, line type scales, and line types. And then it also is getting you into those different units. Okay. So does anybody have any questions then?
Nope.
Okay, I will, basically I'm done for the evening. Next week, we're gonna finish off with edit commands. So we've got quite a few edit commands that we're gonna be doing. And that last drawing we're gonna be working on has probably the most complexity, but we're building into the you know, really good stuff at this point. So again, if you haven't turned in drawings 1, 2, and 3, let's try to get those in as soon as possible. If you need help with anything, just shoot me an email, or you can go into my Starfish calendar and you can set up an appointment. I can do a Zoom session with anybody, anytime, and it works really effectively. I know I've done it with a couple people, and I think we've worked it through pretty well. Okay. Again, if you have zeros out there right now on your lab 1, it just means I don't have it yet. Okay. So just says, hey, turn it in as soon as you can so I can rectify that grade. Okay. Any other questions anybody has?
Nope.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. I'll stay on for a little bit if anybody wants to ask questions, and then I will get this this formatted and hopefully up tonight so that you'll be able to look back at this. Okay. So you guys.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Have a good evening, and